Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining today's informative webinar. I believe most of you know me or know of me as I've been president and chief bottle washer for CodeSmart for many, many years now. My brief background starts way back when I was drinking Jack Daniels in a hot tub, and 2 days later, I was in the IT industry, straight out of college. From there, I was with a few organizations, including successfully bringing software products to the market and building consulting businesses. This webinar is designed to get you thinking of new ways to serve your customers, the end users, and will make most efficient use of scarce IT resources. I now turn this over to Bob for his introduction.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming. I don't know about you, but this work from home is starting to feel like the new normal for me out here in Redmond. We went to work from home when Microsoft did back on March 4th. So we'll be coming up on 2 months now in a couple of weeks. It is definitely burning in as a new long-term way of working. And what they're telling us now, particularly we follow Microsoft's advice and how they're going to reopen, and they're coming out with guidance and saying basically we're not going to be turning a dial and or flipping a switch and turning things on. It's going to be more of a dial, and as many people as can work from home will, and people that have situations that need them to work from home will, and that this will continue on into next year even probably. Being prepared to have fewer people at work and more people working remote is really something that I think you're here today for, right? We want to make those people that are going to be doing that over the next year plus, do that as productively as possible, right? So and securely as possible. So we're going to talk about those two elements today: productivity and security. A little bit about my background: I've got over 30 years of technology consulting experience. I've been consulting to Microsoft and with Microsoft since the Windows 95 launch back in the fall of '95. So it's been a few years, and I'm going to be telling you the stories of some of the folks that we've helped get up onto teams and optimize their teams implementations and broaden them, as well as WVD in response to the COVID epidemic, and what those companies and government agencies are doing to leverage that technology to make their employees as productive as possible. Prasad, over to you.
Thank you, Bob. Hi, everyone. I'm Prasad Paluri. I'm the Director of Cloud Services at People Tech Group. I have 20 years of experience, and most of my experience have been working with Microsoft as a full-time, as an engineer with the Windows Server and Windows Org and other product teams. So I bring in that experience into the People Tech and CodeSmart. So for the last 4+ years, myself and my team, we have been closely working with the Microsoft product team, and we have gone through the complete journey of migrating the remote desktop services workload from on-prem data centers from Windows Server to Azure Cloud. Initially, it was IaaS service. Now it's called as Windows Virtual Desktop (WVD), which is part of the which is part of the core Azure services now. And we have been working with Microsoft hand in hand with, and we have been releasing a lot of open source tools for WVD, which includes management, diagnostics, UX, a lot more. And I'll be going through a little bit of that and also talk about our solution in this webinar here. Back to you, Bob.
Next.
Great, thanks. Just wanted to tell you a little bit about our family of companies, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mark. But we've got People Tech Group as the parent company, and over the past decade or decade plus, we've grown with a number of different companies that all bring our offerings together to the marketplace. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about CodeSmart?
Yeah, so most of you logged on knowing this is a CodeSmart thing. You're seeing different company names on here. This slide illustrates the relationship between the companies. Since 2014, we have been in a family of companies with a common ownership across all the companies. You'll see here People Tech Group is the overarching parent company, and each of the companies have their own focus specialties. This allows any of our companies to present IT solutions across many specialties without trying to be the master of all. For example, CodeSmart, you've known as very well with application development, integration, COTS implementation, et cetera. You know, Firesoft, who's doing the majority of the presentation, is that premier US Microsoft managed partner, desktop cloud collaboration. So Microsoft, not Microsoft, I'm sorry, Firesoft and CodeSmart have teamed up to make this presentation to say, as you saw on the previous slide and we talked about, where both companies are sister companies and we operate interchangeably. Firesoft is the expert on digital transformation. Both of our companies are gold partners for Microsoft in North America. This helps our customers, the digital transformation, how to reimagine how they work, bring together people, data, processes, and to bring value to their customers. Next. This is the agenda for how we will proceed today. Prasad, can you take it over?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. So today we'll briefly go across how we are enabling a remote workforce and what are the business drivers, and also talk about, Bob is going to present some of the use cases stories, and then I'm going to talk about the solution and our rapid deployment approach, and we have a rapid response team to work on it. I'm going to go into the details of that. Yeah, we can go into the next slide. So the first slide here, it's all about like why WVD, like what are the business drivers for WVD? So working with many partners and working with Microsoft, we have classified what are the key driving factors for WVD. So one of the key with COVID is everybody wants to work from home. Everybody wants to have a secure endpoint, secure workplace to work from. They want all the data sovereignty, data integrity. Those are the common new aspects of it. But in general, like WVD is going to be staying there long term beyond beyond COVID. And here are the business driving factors. So I will go through in detail each of them as we go through the next slides. But overall, the cost is going to reduce. The TCO of having your endpoint managing your desktop, which includes if you add up like your infrastructure, software, services, and all the labor costs, there's a TCO for managing your desktop on your IT. So with WVD, I'll explain how that cost is going to reduce. And a lot of companies are moving away from their revamping their business models from CapEx to OpEx. Instead of going through a huge data center hardware refresh. So now they are looking at way of the subscription model, and they are realigning their strategy and business as well. And you all might be aware, Windows 7 is end of service. Windows 2008, if you have hosted any of your virtual desktop infrastructure on 2008, it's also going to go end of service. No more security updates. It's going to be expensive. Microsoft is supporting like a 2-year contract with a huge premium cost. But Microsoft is allowing users to migrate Windows 7 apps and Windows 7 desktops into the cloud. That way you don't need to like you don't need to rebuild everything on the cloud. And one of the common thing that we are seeing across the board is bring your own device. Like it all started with startups. Now we are seeing more and more organization going towards this bring your own devices. But one of the majority of the risk is how do you manage your endpoint devices where people are accessing resources, including their Office 365 inbox from different devices and from their home computers. And from especially from regulated industries, security and compliance are still holding good in this changing landscape, and how WVD is going to play a role. I'll explain a little bit more in detail. And also a lot of organizations have this need for bringing in on-demand workers, like seasonal workers or any specialty occupation workers. And how do you bring them quickly onto your team without having to go through a tedious IT process, like enabling a desktop within few hours and enabling users and having them get started. And then we'll talk more about the work from home scenarios that COVID has brought us right now. These are the core business drivers we are seeing in the market right now. Nick, can we go next? Nick, can you go to the next slide, please?
So thanks,
Yeah,
Prasad.
go ahead,
I'll
Bob.
take it from here. Virtualization has has traditionally supported a number of classic use cases. Some of these we're very familiar with. Companies have used virtualization for years to address business-specific needs and provide secure access to data and organizational resources that their employees need. And some of those classic use cases can now be migrated to WVD and into the cloud, basically, right? Things like ensuring compliance for industry standards, with industry standards across regulated industries, financial services, healthcare, government, et cetera, allowing you to quickly spin up elastic workforces as needed, like for short-term things, mergers and acquisitions, for instance. You might have short-term employees or contractors. Virtual desktops also allow you to support specific employee needs, like BYOD, which is very much in play now as people use their tablets and computers that they have throughout their homes to access agency or entity resources. As well, the classic case of the call center and branch workers. Virtual desktop is a very standard way of deploying applications that are needed into those places without having to spend money on expensive hardware, right? But still allow you tight control and security of those applications and data. Another, finally, a classic use case is handling specialized workloads, things like engineering design apps or legacy applications that don't run on other on other server systems and PCs. These are good, solid use cases that still exist today. Now we have a cloud platform like WVD to help us with it, though, right? In addition, now we've got what coronavirus has brought to the table. Can you go to the next slide, Nick? So this has really, the COVID-19 pandemic has really forced a new normal for us, right? This work from home scenario that, as I said, we're going to need to be supporting for the next couple of years, right? And WVD can now be used to support many more traditional office-based functions in government, sales and marketing, healthcare, and education, right? Many more job functions need to now have secure remote access to the tools they need to do their jobs productively. And these are the scenarios we're lighting up now. Some of these are routine tasks like planning and meetings, right? Other things are very specialized, delivering delivering healthcare, via telemedicine, counseling services. These are things that need secure access to applications as well as video conferencing technology and team-oriented technology that can keep them productive, right? And I don't know about you, but that last guy in the photo there doesn't seem to be getting a lot of work done. WVD and Teams can do a lot of things, but I don't know that they're going to help with that, help you be productive with that 2-year-old on your lap. But we are here today to talk about these scenarios and to talk about how some of the specific scenarios that we've lit up and what some of the companies have done. Next. So I'm going to start with a story telling you a little bit about the city of Atlanta. So the city of Atlanta, we started first working with them almost 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, when they were hit by a different kind of virus, the ransomware kind. They were hit hard across all their departments, and we were the first boots on the ground alongside Microsoft, helping them spin up new systems and get their apps up and running again. Now here we are 2 years later, and we get the call, and we're there now fighting a more traditional virus, right? One that had threatened to shut down city services. So within an hour of notice, we had a team of 10 deep rolling out Teams and WVD within the city of Atlanta to help battle their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This work helped get many of the city employees up and running from home with secure access to their applications and with secure video conferencing and teamwork functionality. This story was then picked up by the Wall Street Journal in an article that featured the CIO of Atlanta, Gary Brantley. It allowed them to move remote work and how the city to home locations so the city could continue to conduct their normal business. The city now has remote workforces holding meetings via Teams. They've even moved the Atlanta City Council meetings to virtual meetings that citizens can join by calling in. And the council will be using their virtual platforms now for voting on legislation and reviewing documents. They have moved their government, many of their government functions to remote online functioning. And they've done that through Teams and WVD. Another customer, Cabot Microelectronics, they were hit hard and early by the virus. They have facilities in Italy. So as soon as Italy started shutting down, they were getting impacted. They had people that were forced to work from home and that needed access to specialized applications that they use in their engineering manufacturing processes. So we actually weren't, we were working at Cabot, but we were working on a whole different project with them. We were moving their SAP applications to Azure. And we heard that they had hastily rolled out WVD to support that Italian situation. We cycled back with them and said, hey, you know, we have a lot of experience in WVD. We work with the WVD product team in Microsoft in Redmond. We've been working with them for 4 years. It's like, really? You know, yeah, we support. We're the tier 2 support for WVD implementations. When customers have issues, we have a call center desk that takes those calls and escalates and helps solve those problems. And so they said, yeah, well, if you've got that expertise, maybe you can look at what we did. We did. We took a quick look at their quick rollout, and we found that it was rolled out and got them up and running, but it wasn't efficient. It wasn't optimized. So now we're working with them to implement auto scaling. Right, they were doing things like leaving machines, running for over the weekend, and lots of computing horsepower not needed at the right times. Auto scaling can help reduce that. They hadn't implemented the FS Logic profile management, so that when you logged in at a different time, you were able to reattach to your old profile and have that follow along with you. That's another productivity enhancement that we're able to roll into their environment. So what we're doing is tuning their environment, saving them money, and making them more productive. Another use case is Columbia University's Teachers College. Teachers College is the oldest and the largest graduate school of education in the United States. And of course, all of their students in New York had to disperse to around the world when they shut down New York City. They moved everything to virtual classrooms, right, which works well for a lot of classes. But some of the courses require their students to access specific third-party applications, things like MATLAB, M+, and Stata, that are only available in the labs on campus, right? Of course, those students don't have access to those labs now. So they needed to get these apps up and running virtually, and so students around the world could get at them. We're helping them right now deploy a pilot, and we're setting up their Azure environment and loading their specific lab apps into those environments and moving that system into production. And so far, the results are excellent, even though that's a very challenging workload. We've got a lot of graphics workload going on. They've got students around the world in Asia, Europe, that are all accessing these apps, and they're reporting excellent performance. So it was a good test case for the production of the productivity around WVD specifically. Right. Next up is DeKalb County, Georgia. Prasad, you've been involved in that implementation. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found there and what you've been able to enable for them? Sure,
Bob. Thank you. After we worked with City of Atlanta, the next engagement we were brought in was the DeKalb County. The Department of Justice had to kind of work remotely from home, and they were not able to access the DOJ apps like Odyssey. So one of the immediate thing we did is within the 48-hour window, we had our rapid response team come in, and then we had this quick onboarding for them in doing a quick assessment analysis and doing a quick design. And then we started doing a quick pilot. From pilot to production to adoption into their enterprise happened everything in 48 hours because it was an emergency situation. We tag team along with Microsoft, and we were the SMEs to do that work. So one of the key things we did with DOJ was trying to bring up their Odyssey app and have that business continuity going for them so they can continue to work from home and use all the apps that are kind of available for them to continue their city operations. Yeah, that's pretty much on the use cases. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So before I start with WVD, I would like to kind of quickly give a brief introduction into Teams. I see a lot of non-enterprises using Slack for for project management, and then using Zoom for video. And you all know about Zoom bombing, what's going on with those security issues, and they have been using different tools for within an organization to do different things within the organization. With working remotely is already a challenge, and having high productivity on top of using all these different tools becomes a challenge. That one is challenge. There are multiple challenges in not using Microsoft Teams. One is security. There is no seamless experience. You need to have different identity to log into different tools that you have. So when we closely work with Microsoft, we see what Teams is capable of and what the roadmap is. Microsoft is kind of heavily invested on Teams, and Teams becomes the center of all this remote workforce and high productivity. So you all might be aware that Teams not only does communication and collaboration like the usual stuff, but Teams is loading with ton of features where we from people like in Firesoft, we go and customize Teams to make it better for them. For example, building a custom chatbot engines so that you can reduce your support cost and your tier one cost. And then we also do customization of transcription service. Like there are some advanced options within Teams that you can enable that will enable your transcription service within the Teams. What we believe is like with from home scenario lighting up and most of the users on Office M365, Teams is the way to go. And our team has specialization in customizing and onboarding organization into Teams. And Firesoft and People Tech can come and pitch more specific scenarios. If you have any specific scenarios in Teams about customization of Teams, we can do a thorough and session for exclusively on Microsoft Teams. Can we go to the next slide? Right. So moving on to the WVD, right? So you all know, like in the past, virtualization of apps and desktop has always been on server infrastructure and server OS, like Windows Server 2012, 2016. Even if you take many of the organizations like Citrix, AWS Workspace, they are still using the Windows Server OS for virtualization of their apps, which is not actually optimized for your end user experience, and it's not optimized for delivering your end user apps. It doesn't enhance your productivity, and it doesn't make your users very productivity. So most of us have always used Office at home or at work through Windows 10 and Office 365 running on our laptops and desktops. So what Microsoft has done in the last 3 years that we have journey working with them is Microsoft is trying to build the same experience of having to run your Windows 10, how you run it on your desktop, to run it on your Azure cloud. So what did Microsoft do is Microsoft built Microsoft built a special SKU of OS, which is called Windows 10, there are two versions of it, Windows 10 single session and Windows 10 multi-session. So depending on whether you're running a user session together on a single VM or you want to have a dedicated VM, you can choose one of those versions of the OS. So with Windows 10 on Azure, so WVD is bringing the best of Windows 10 and Office to your end user experience. And not only that, it can be accessed from any platform. Like if you have used RD Web and previous RDS remote desktop services technology, there was RD client and RD Web, and everything is enhanced now with WVD. So you can access from any platform, from any device, from any thin client. So you don't need to worry about your endpoint devices and data staying within the on-prem within your enterprise. You can keep all your data onto the cloud and have your virtualized apps and desktops virtualized to the end users through the virtualization of apps or virtualization of desktops, and they can use through any platform and through any different ways, through HTML5 or through the RD client application. So one of the key things that made this happen was virtualization was always sticking on to the Windows Server team for a long time, I would say like 15, 20 years. Now, if you see the Microsoft, the way the WVD team is aligned, they're aligned more towards Azure and they're more aligned towards Office. So there is a this is a combination of two teams coming together and bringing this experience to bring the Office 365 very much optimized, not only for your desktop and not only for your online, but also for WVD, so that it seamlessly integrates within your Windows 10 on Azure Cloud. So I'm going to talk about like some of the a few of the benefits. So Teams and WVD team have worked 2 years. So they have optimized Teams in terms of increasing the frame rates, and then also optimizing the bandwidth that's consumed for high performance and low latency. There is a lot of innovative work that's going on underneath under the RDP protocol, exclusively on the WVD stuff. Previous slide, sorry about that. And through Microsoft recently acquisition, sorry, next slide. Microsoft recently acquisition a company called FX Logic, if you're aware. What they try to do is, with this whole multi-sessions, you can have your user profile containerized through FX Logic. So FX Logic is available through M365 license. You're not paying anything additional. So all your Outlook profiles can be containerized through FX Logic. So when a user connects to a Windows 10 multi-session, automatically, if you have enabled FX Logic, there are 3 ways to enable it. One is through NetApps, Azure Files, and SMB, depending on your performance, what kind of performance you're looking for, and then automatically mounts your user profile as a container. With this containerization of profiles, they extended this for your desktop indexes. So like anything that you search, your apps, or any content that you have on OneDrive, you can desktop index caching is also containerized and available to you when you log into your multi-session desktop. And there is so much of improvements have been done on OneDrive. I don't need to sell this. You all know that OneDrive is in the Azure cloud, and WVD runs on the Azure cloud, and the network bandwidth that they have to connect to any files, opening any files, any large files like MATLAB or CAD becomes very easy because you're not trying to synchronize your files to all your devices locally. Like many of us have multiple devices, and now you have to bring all the devices locally. And now with OneDrive for Business, you don't want to sync up all the 1 terabyte of data into your local drives. So it becomes very reliable and faster with OneDrive sync on WVD. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide. So coming on to the next part, security, right? So traditionally, all the virtualization of desktops is done through opening up a port, specialized port. You have to open up certain port for virtualization. Now with WVD, they changed the entire technology, and there is no inbound ports to any of your infrastructure on Azure. So you don't need to worry about monitoring your inbound ports for security reason. Everything is done through reverse connect, and all the users connect to the connection broker and gateway that you are not managing, but Microsoft is managing it for you. So the reliability is high, the security is high, and all your infrastructure that you're building and owning on Azure, you don't need to worry about having any public IPs, or you don't need to worry about opening up any ports for WVD. And one of the other important aspect of WVD is now WVD is kind of integrated into AAD by default. So now you have to come up with an identity strategy of how you're going to connect your on-prem AD to AAD, and how you're building this whole Azure infrastructure. And part of our process, I can explain a little bit more in depth, but as you all know, that AAD brings in all this rich identity services for you. Like if you get your multi-factor authentication, you don't need to buy an additional identity provider for those services. You also get conditional access, you get intelligent graph, and if you want to go further along, you can also bring in Sentinel. So there are more options available because the whole identity of WVD is run through the Azure Active Directory service and all the other benefits of AAD. And one of the other key benefits of WVD is previously in RDS, your network admins, your system admins used to have the admin role on all the infrastructure, like your brokers, gateway, and then they used to have full control. But in large, especially in enterprise with all this compliance of who holds to what kind of access, so WVD has come up with certain role-based access, and depending on what kind of roles they are in, they are operator role, contributor role, or owner role, they'll be able to operate certain things, whether they're able to create a tenant or a host pool or adding a user, depending on their roles, they can be assigned that. Not only that, you can assign these roles at any level in WVD. You can assign a owner, you can assign a limited role on the top of the chain, and then have very restricted access in the bottom of the whole chain of WVD. So it gives you more control in role-based access. That was something that was not available earlier, and it adds like a lot of security to how you do your virtualization of your infrastructure and desktops on the cloud. Next slide. One of the important aspects here is a lot of people ask, like there's so much interest in WVD, and the numbers within Microsoft, they've already gone on with, even before COVID, they were shooting 600% growth rate, more than they expected, because a lot of partners saw the advantage of how cost optimized this WVD solution is. It depends on how you're setting it up, how you're configuring it, and how you're taking advantage of this cost optimization on WVD. So one of the key factor in WVD is WVD is bringing this Windows 10 desktop experience on a multi-session cost. What I mean by multi-session cost is you can have a Windows 10 multi-session VM, and you can add as many hosts depending on the size of the VM. And what it does is it distributes all your workload, and then you can turn on and off your VMs as you need it. And one of the cool thing is we worked with Microsoft to build the scale script. The Microsoft scale script is something that we kind of own in the GitHub, and we kind of continuously update all the bits of GitHub in the open source for scaling. One of the major benefit of scaling is it allows you to only pay and provision what you're using. And you don't want to be paying for the weekends. You don't want to be paying after hours. You want to bring them down to a minimum VM. That's exactly the benefit of the scaling. And we have been working on the scale for almost a couple of years, improvising and working with a lot of partners in making it workable for a lot of people. So when you move on to cloud adoption, one of the important aspect in governance other than security is how do you do your cost management. So that's where the scale script plays a huge role in controlling your cost and keeping your cost within your budget. The other advantage of WVD is you don't need to set up a VDI infrastructure. Even if you go into like any of the other frameworks like competitors, like you have to set up your VDI infrastructure. Now you have to worry about your licensing server, gateway broker. So now if you look at the right side diagram, Microsoft is owning that as a first party service. It's available for free. So you're not paying for anything. Microsoft scales it. Microsoft gives you that 99.98 reliability for you on those services. They're trying to improve it more and more. And the other aspect is you don't need to have any additional licenses to use WVD. Previously used to have RDS-Cal, or if you have bought Citrix or AWS Workspace, underneath those services, everybody were paying RDS-Cal licenses to Microsoft. So Microsoft made this available for free so that you can have it if you're part of the M365. They're expanding those licensing more and more. There's a broader classification of all these licenses of what is eligible, and they're giving free licenses during this COVID situation so people can try, experiment, pilot, POC, adopt. And then if you're already on Windows 10, you don't need to worry about it. And some of you who are in Azure, you might have heard about reserved instance. If it's like signing up your phone plan, it's like you're going through a reserved instance, and then it brings your cost down by 70%. And if you are in IT, you already might know that WVD multi-session desktop is built at a Linux cost. If you're spinning up a Windows Server OS on Azure, you're paying higher cost, but with Windows 10 multi-session, you are paying the bare minimum Linux cost, and you also have a little bit of reduction in labor in terms of not having to manage some of this infrastructure for you, because everything is managed by the Microsoft Cloud on the infrastructure side. But in terms of managing your session host and publishing apps and publishing users, that's where you can also bring down the cost by using third-party tools. Like we have built one of the tools called as DAS Manager. This is built based on a lot of our experience working in Microsoft. That will also reduce your cost drastically and bring the total cost of ownership of running a desktop in your IT to a major cost reduction. Can you go to the next slide? So I talked about how do we get this started, right? So we got this WVD running for a couple of cities, states, and enterprises. anywhere from 2 days to 1 week. It depends on whether we are doing a standard process or a custom process. Depending on whether they are regulated, then we do a lot of this prepping up their infrastructure and all that. One of the key thing, once what we do is we have a rapid response team. We have set it up for this COVID situation. We tag team like from Firesoft. There's an expertise on system engineering. We have a ton of experienced system engineers, network engineers, and Azure experts who do a lot of the enterprise grade services. And we also, people that have this WVD experts coming in, we tag team into this team called as rapid response team. And we go through a process called rapid deployment process. So we start with initial discovery, assessing your identity strategy, understanding your security requirements, and going through your image, like what kind of apps you need, how many users you're trying to bring. And then as part of the initial discovery and prerequisite, what we initially do is we scope the first project. We don't, for City of Atlanta, we did a big bang, but most of the customers, we first identify how their first project should look like, and we help them to scope the project by allowing them to make the right decisions. Like they have to choose remote wrap versus remote desktop. They have to choose whether a shared host pool versus a dedicated host pool. So we guide them through the process, and then every companies on different levels in terms of their Azure understanding and how they have set up and extended their on-prem network to the Azure cloud. We work hand in hand with them in making sure that they are laying this cloud infrastructure for longer term in terms of how they set up their domain controller, how they set up their VPN, express route. And we also have something called as mission critical cloud configuration that we tag team with Microsoft. We bring in the resilient patterns for making sure you have domain controllers in 2 different regions. So you have this high availability, and you also go through this compliances of your government policies of how an infrastructure should be running, including your backup to all your firewalls, NSGs, and all those things. We tag team and do it. So once we do the initial discovery, we quickly enable them by helping them build their first image of what kind of apps they want to bring in. And once we have that initial setup, the network and system prerequisite setup, our product team will come and run few scripts, and then we enable the product. Once the product is implemented, we provide 2 weeks of support. The entire goal is to make sure we have given you enough information for you to take it and run it by yourself. Our team, Firesoft team, kind of quickly comes in and helps you do that. And then once it is done, most of the our success is based on how City of Atlanta or DeKalb or Cabot able to manage their environment by themselves. But when we work with a lot of MSPs, they wanted something called as a managed service, where they want us to do the tier 2 and tier 3. That will be like another service which we can consider depending on the skill levels and complexity of, and then the level of the number of tenants and host pool they're trying to bring into the environment. Yeah, moving on to the next slide. Yeah, so before I jump onto the product demo, I would like to kind of quickly give you insight into like what did we learn and as part of all these deployments, and why did we see a quick need of having a DAS manager? So what we see is customer always goes through this journey. Like the first thing is, hey, I'm eager to deploy. I want to do it myself. Right? And then they go through all this product documentation, which we have worked with Microsoft, and you can go to GitHub and see a lot of content to how to deploy, how to manage all those resources we own on GitHub. So a lot of customers, when they do that, we end up supporting them through Microsoft in their tier 2 because they have their unique environment, or they are not comfortable customizing the PowerShell scripts, or they are not familiar how to handle ARM templates, or there is always a steep learning curve on understanding the benefits of WVD and taking the full advantage of WVD rather than going through a docs.microsoft.com and setting up the way you kind of understand it. So once they do deploy, what we see is the next thing that they do is they want to do manage, like they wanted to scale. Okay, I set up this pilot environment. Now, how do I scale it? So what happens is scaling through PowerShell script becomes a very hard job. And they get this request to, hey, can you adding users, maintaining all the users, making sure like the right users are added to the right the host pools and app groups, and then publishing apps and unpublishing apps depending on each department request, and making sure like how do they take backup of making sure backing up all this user profile data, and some of them don't have a good understanding of how to set up FX logic. For example, Cabot didn't know how to do it because they went through the process and it was complicated. So they were going through this process of users complaining back to them that our office is not performing as promised. And then we realized that they have not even set up the FX logic container, and they have not set up scale script. So that's where we see that like there is no one place for people to go and manage everything. So right now everything is very fragmented and available through Microsoft, but it's very fragmented. So once they set up this whole environment for, let's say, they set it up for department 1, department 2, department 3, then the next thing is IT hears like a lot of complaints like, hey, I'm not able to log in, I'm getting connection refused, or sometimes users are complaining like their network bandwidth is really slow when they're trying to connect from their remote location, like from home or some remote work areas. So now they come back to us like, okay, help us here because we don't have enough sufficient information for diagnostics. We don't know where to start with and how to diagnose these issues there. So there is no one tool for available. You can enable MMA, Microsoft Monitoring Agent, Azure Monitor, but now you're scrambling through log analytics queries and all that, but it takes a lot of time to get there. And then the next thing is once you cross the monitoring stage, one of the key thing is, yeah, everybody said WVD is cost effective, but still I see my Azure bills high. The key reason is like they didn't take advantage of multi-session. They didn't take advantage of scale script. They didn't set up the scale script right. There's a breadth type and there is a depth type, and depending on the time of the day, they have to start setting up more of a breadth, and then once they come into the evening hours, they have to set the depth so that some of the VMs get freed up so that we can turn off those VMs as the user session starts logging off from those session host servers. All this learning or experience we get by working through multiple partners and through Microsoft. A lot of partners don't have a good understanding of that. So that becomes a challenge for customers. So when we looked at this whole picture, then we realized like we have to scale this and help a lot of customers. And with that effort, we have been working on this for the last 1.5, 2 years, and we have developed a tool which I would like to quickly demo. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, before I move on to the demo, I would like to quickly explain. On the top right corner, the entire WVD infrastructure is managed by Microsoft. And then you bring in your own client subscription where all your session host runs, all your backup is, all your backup, containerization, file servers, site-to-site VPN, everything, express route, everything stays in your client subscription. And then if you look at your on-prem, you have your end users connecting to the Microsoft to connect to their desktops, either a remote app or a remote desktop. But if you look at the IT manager, they have two options. Either they call APIs into the WVD service and then also go into the portal.azure.com or go into the PowerShell modules and then play with it. Or we are trying to create a single plane of glass where they can go in and then they can manage and optimize. They can manage, monitor, deploy, and optimize their entire environment in one place. So that becomes the complexity of managing the WVD drastically down, and the number of people you need to manage WVD also drastically down. So that brings your total cost of ownership down for WVD. So can you go to the next slide? So I would like to share my screen and then go ahead with the demonstration.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. So once you log into the WVD, let me quickly log in here. Yeah, so once you log into the WVD here, this is how your entire dashboard looks like. On the top, you have couple of modules you can go into manage or monitor. We separated that because based on Microsoft clearly said there are different roles that an organization can assign different people to do it. So that's why those two modules have been kept separate. And you can go into the global search and type in like a keyword, and you can see that across your host pool, your desktops, your app groups. That's an easy way for you to jump into a particular item. Like if a particular user needs to be added, or if a particular app group needs to be enabled, you can quickly jump in here. And if you have multi-tenant within your enterprise or CSP, you can come in and then you can switch between your organizations. And then Microsoft has a concept called as tenant group, and some of that may not apply for every enterprise, but for certain CSPs and enterprises that applies. And here you can come in and look at all your, they call it host pool, you can call it your departments, and you can see all your hosts within that host pool. It gives you a holistic picture about your tenant, all the information. Here it gives you a snapshot of how many session hosts are being enabled within your tenant, and it also gives you the number of sessions that are getting active and deactivated within that host, within your tenant. And you can always go back and look at it at any given point of time. So let me go into some of the key features. I'm not going to go and touch every feature because that takes its own time. I'm going to quickly skip through some of the features, and if anything of of your interest, please reach out to us, and I can do a customized detailed demo for you on more one-on-one session. So you can bring your own image, or you can create a new image, a VM image, so that that allows you to create a host in your host pool. So that way you can come in here and then do all this work. Once you do that, you can go into the manage host pool. Host pools are nothing but your departments. Host pool has the session host VMs, and then the app groups. These are the different app groups. App groups are like the sub departments. Either you can have a desktop app group, or you can have a remote app group. So if you have a desktop app group, you can see like what if it's a desktop, then it doesn't show the apps. It does show you all the users. If you're in the remote app group, it shows you like what are the apps you have published, and then what are the users you have here, right? One of the common things that people do at a host pool level is they wanted to implement scale policy. Either you do scale through the Windows scheduler, or through logic apps. It's a little bit complicated. Or you can come in here and you can select the policy type, and you can create multiple policies depending on the time of the day, and you can set up the minimum number of desktops you want to be running, and you can set all these parameters. Based on these parameters, it'll kickstart in the background all your policies, so that it automatically turns on and turns off your VMs depending on your demand that you need. You can also log off. You can also have additional parameters where you can set to log off certain users after work hours if they have not been active with a message, so that you can automatically use that for scaling as well. One of the other thing is backup and scale. Uh, you can create this backup on Azure, or you can come into this host pool and do this a backup, so that you don't need to figure out which resources I need to back up and what I'm doing. So you can create a policy, and then automatically it applies to all the resources within that particular host pool. That way it abstracts you from creating a backup policy on Azure and going into multiple places to do that. One of the key features that people do is, let's say you set up a host pool, you set up 3 host machines, and you are trying to add more and more users. When you add more users, you need to enable more session hosts. Like the scale does not enable automatically provision a session host. The scale automatically turns on and off the session host. But here you can come in and select a particular VM image, and then you can say which host pool you want to do that, and then specify the number of session hosts and automatically provision those desktops. Automatically, those desktops get provisioned, but they get turned off by default, and then the scale script will turn them on and off automatically. The other common action that people do within the app groups is they come and configure the apps and users. So you can come in and set up a new app group within your organization here. Yeah, you can do that. And once again, and then you can also go into the specific apps and publish apps, and also publish users for that particular app groups as well. Before I jump in, like there are multiple ways you can directly jump into the session host, go into the app groups, or you can go into the host pool and then click on a specific app groups here. For example, Office accounting. I go into the Office accounting app group, and I can publish apps and publish users within that particular app group as well. That's the two way. Either you can jump or go directly there. This is on the management side. I would like to quickly go into the monitoring. As I said, like we bring in all this monitoring features here. You can go and look at your engineering session host, and you can look at all this data. You get all this rich informations, and you can have a look at it. So that's pretty much on the demo side. I'm going to give it back to Nick.
And let me just to throw in here, it's Bob, that you know what this tool basically does is take the learning curve from getting a WVD environment up and running and managed and monitored professionally, in from weeks of time probably to a matter of days or less. We can get these environments up in less than a week, in fact, and your resources that need to manage these environments can get up and proficient managing them very, very quickly in a matter of a couple of days. They can be proficient at managing all that they need to manage and monitoring everything they need to monitor. So it's a dramatically improved learning curve for the folks that are managing and rolling out your infrastructure using these tools.
This is Nick. I hope everyone can see my screen again.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide?
Next slide.
I can do that.
So Microsoft has come up with new programs to help this COVID situation. They have come up with WVDAccelerate Program. What it allows you to do is if you're bringing anywhere close to 25 plus users in an environment, Microsoft is funding those initiatives. They're funding like 20K provided by Microsoft in bringing those users, but there is a commitment to have those users for the next 3 months on your Azure environment. And for certain customers, they're also giving Azure credit on top of giving this funds for doing the POC and getting started on WVD pilot. On top of that, you can get our access to our WVD Dash Manager for free for 6 months, and thereafter it's going to be 3 users per user per month. And if you want to do by concurrent users, it's going to be $5 per user for concurrent user per month. And you also get the advantage of working with all our WVD resources who have like strong connections into the WVD community and also into the Microsoft product team.
So with this offer, agencies can get a pilot up and running at little to no cost. I mean, it is Microsoft is really going a long way here. We can come in and assist with this and get it up and running in a week under this program and support you for a couple of weeks as you get the learning curve. And with those Azure credits that they're bringing in, it's really a very attractive offer. And what we found is folks that are taking advantage of this is they're using WVD to basically be the driver behind getting their Azure environments up and into enterprise grade form. And following the WVD rollout, they're having us migrate applications to Azure that need to be migrated. So it can be used as a jump start into the cloud for some of your migrations as well. Next. Oh, and by the way, on this offer, we certainly would love to get together with you and one-on-one and talk through it and what it would look like and how we would execute a plan like that. So please let us know. Any questions out there? Nick, have you been able to pick up any questions from the crowd?
Not yet, but I'll tab back over to my box to see if any have come in. Folks, this is your big chance to put my guys on the spot here. So I hope a couple questions come up.
Let me step in here, Nick. If anybody would like a one-on-one conversation with us, no obligation on that one-on-one conversation, please send Nick an email at nick.nortelli@codesmartinc.com. I've also put that information in the chat box for you. And
depending on your unique situation, folks, we will kind of tailor that to the exact right expert. We've got a great team of people who have deep expertise, some of them in very specialized areas. So yeah, give us a shout. For the next about 2 days, I'm going to be able to fill up slots for free. So please shout me quickly after this meeting. And before we go on to the thank you slide, let me give a big shout out. Thank you so much for all of you who supported us and joined us for our first webinar. I hope we did well, and I'm looking forward to your